Hi everyone, and welcome to today's CPSA webinar on prospecting with social media, proudly sponsored by Avis. Please note that you will receive a webinar recording after this session and that you will be able to ask questions at the end of the session using the Q&A function. Avis is a longtime partner with the CPSA, providing members with a premium rental experience. Special CPSA negotiated rates are available for business and savings of up to 25% off Avis base rates for leisure rentals. Complimentary membership in Avis Preferred, access to the youngest fleet in the business, and the ability to learn aeroplane miles will further enhance your travel experience. Please visit avis.ca/CPSA for more information and to reserve. Today's webinar host is Jamie Jackson, leader of Toronto-based group Rockstar Sales, a group which seeks to bridge the gap and provide sales professionals with solutions to increase efficiency in day-to-day sales activities. As a group of full-time sales reps, Rockstar Sales' mandate is to mentor and train fellow sales professionals on what they wish they had been taught in the first place, online and cost-effective solutions that are easily digestible on how to increase sales productivity. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jamie to start. Jamie?
Thank you, Rublin. Good morning, everyone. So, first of all, thank you for taking the time on a Monday to improve your own sales skills. What we want to tuck into today is the different ways to use social media for prospecting. Because I, for one, as a full-time rep, I hear a lot about social selling and social media, particularly how it's changing the sales process. This is going to delve into how I'm using this and my team is using this to delve in and actually the nitty-gritty. How do you reach people? What do you use? What works? What doesn't? At least what we found. And the reason why we do this, we do these free seminars for the CPSA is because we have a coaching service available that our objective is to quadruple your prospecting without sinking too much more time into what you're doing already. It's improving the efficiency of your prospecting. So anybody that wants that, I would encourage you to reach out and we'll be happy to show you exactly how we do that. So today, let's talk a little bit about prospecting. In the old days, we used to call up and used to ask people, say, you know, could I speak to the person responsible for? And if everybody's old enough to remember those days, it was an interesting time. Half the battle was just figuring out who you need to talk to. The primary value in social media today is that you can actually skip that step with things like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which we'll tuck into in a moment. Now, before we do that, I want a bit of feedback from the audience here in terms of how many people right now are using Sales Navigator currently, because this will determine how far in depth that we're going to go in terms of the nitty-gritty of how to use the tool. Make sense? So just send me a message on the chat function and we'll tuck into Sales Navigator. How many people are actually actively using Sales Navigator right now? So while we're waiting for that, here's what we want to do today. We're going to walk everybody through exactly what that process looks like to find who you need to talk to and reach out to them, and be covering various social media tools. We're going to have some commentary on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Google News, and the old school websites as well. And I would include those last two in social media because it gives you an informational advantage and the line is blurring. So we want to be able to use all of these tools. Here's what we found to be successful, what works and what doesn't. Make sense? So audience, how many people here are actually using LinkedIn Sales Navigator currently?
I think we've got about a 50-50 yes to no response rate in the Q&A bar.
Oh, okay. That gives us good functionality. The next question I want you to think about as we tuck into this is have a think about the criteria of people that you would like to reach out to in your own prospecting. Because if we could, I'd like to take a live example here after we use one of the ones that I'm using. And we'll actually take somebody on the call right now and we'll help you find some people to talk to and what to say to them. If that's a value, we're happy to tuck into that. So let's take a look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So this is my LinkedIn Sales Navigator account right now. This is the most valuable tool for the 50% of the audience that doesn't use it. It's pretty much the most valuable tool that you'll have as a salesperson. The prices just went up. It's somewhere between $700 and $900 a year. And what it allows you to do is to be able to find people to talk to skip that old conversation of can I speak to the person responsible for, and it allows you to reach out to them using a feature called LinkedIn Inmail. We'll talk into that in a sec. Let's take a look at what Sales Navigator looks like in terms of their lead builder function. So this is the home page for Sales Navigator. LinkedIn is the most, in my opinion, I think it's the most important piece of social media for B2B sales. So we're going to spend the most time on this. We click on lead builder. This is what comes up. This is what we call an advanced search for who to talk to. So in my case, right now I'm advising a company and they have a really neat application for the agreement to cash process. It used to be accounts payable in the old days, where they can apply robotic process automation to this. So this is who they need to talk to. In terms of geography, they can talk to any company in Canada. The company size, it's really suitable for somewhere between 500 and 5,000 employees. Smaller than that doesn't really work. Larger than that, they have their own teams. We want to talk to folks in the accounting function at the VP or director level is what I've tagged in there. And I've used the keywords agreement to cash, so and they're responsible for it. As you can see, for those of you who don't use LinkedIn Sales Navigator, there's a lot of other things that you can search for, advanced filters. I'd encourage everybody to explore it. The most important ones are typically around company size, job title, function. The real important ones for me have been up here. Occasionally you can find some interesting things down there as well if you're looking for a specific person, but for the most part, these are the people that you're going to want to start talking to. So once you've got your target audience, and I'm presuming as salespeople here, everybody's going to have that target audience, we're going to actually want to reach out to them. Now, let's see what comes up. So this is what comes up. There are 16 total results. These are real people, and these are real results, and people that we're actually going to be running out to. If you want, you can actually change the geography, some of the criteria that you're looking for. On the left, VP and director, you can see, you can filter that out. Now, there's only 16 people in this, so we probably don't need any more filters. I like to narrow it down to 30 or 40 personally, as a rule of thumb, because that gives me the most narrow view of who I actually need to talk to. And the first thing you want to do is double check, are these actually people that you want to talk to? So I brought up this first gentleman here, Daniel M. I don't know Daniel personally, but let's take a look. So with LinkedIn, for those of you who are using it already, particularly the people who use Sales Navigator a lot, here's the net version of what you're looking for in somebody's profile. Here's what we look for. There's really a couple of key things. One, who do you know in common? I see we know these three people in common. And two, I'm looking at how long have they been in their job? And here's why. Number one, in terms of who we know together, LinkedIn's, according to their own research, says that mentioning the people you know is the single biggest factor in whether somebody will respond to your email or not. That's really important. I'll even say it again. Mentioning people you know is the single biggest factor whether someone will respond to you or not. So I'm always looking for people that we know in common. The second thing I've noticed, and this is what LinkedIn doesn't bring in, is that people, for me, as a B2B sales rep, I'm usually looking to instigate change. I want them to change the way they're doing something to make it more efficient, to make it faster, to make it cost less. And I found that people that are relatively new to their jobs is very critical, because those people that are new to their jobs want to come in and bring a different take on some of the challenges that are facing them, fresh eyes on an old problem. And in that case, they're actually more open to meetings, they're more open to ideas. And this is why I'm always looking, so I can see he's been there 1 year, 2 months. Okay, so not bad. Your ideal is 90 days. And let's go back to the Sales Navigator function. I see when I click on this, one has changed jobs in the past 90 days. That is the most important filter on those results that you will find. Now, it turns out Sarah's probably not somebody I need to talk to, but that's fine. In a lot of other cases, those are exactly the people you want to talk to because they're new, and also, when you think about it, their calendar isn't quite as full. They've got more time to meet with you, which always helps too. Does that make sense? Another very useful filter for advanced users is this, posted on LinkedIn in the past 30 days. And here's how I'll typically use that. I'll read what they've posted and I'll comment on it. Again, what it shows is that it's personalized, that you are looking out for them rather than just a big mass email blast. Now this is important. So now that you've found someone you want to talk to, let me give you an example of some things not to do. Here's what most people do, and this has been an interesting experience for me because just recently as well, I've been now in a position where I have salespeople pitching me products. The good news is this, the bar is not high. I get approximately 2 to 3 LinkedIn connection requests per day with nothing written in the note whatsoever. I got one this morning, for example, and I won't bring it up because I don't want to embarrass the person. She had reached out, and she's a call center and lead generation company owner, and she just sent me a connection request. And I absolutely denied it. I don't know her. Why would I connect with you? In particular, because I've been down that road before, as a buyer, what'll happen is you'll get that connection request, and immediately you'll get a request very shortly thereafter for asking for an hour of your time with a very, very vague value prop. Well, we can help you make more money. We'll help you cut your time. That doesn't help. You need to tell me why. What makes you different? What makes you different from the 30 other people that have tried it this today? Very interesting. I was sitting down with an SVP of a bank about 2 weeks ago, and he said, do you know, in the time that we've met, I've received 3 people connecting me, asking me to connect on LinkedIn and pitching me with terrible value props. And so that's one thing is you don't want to do. Definitely don't just find a guy like Daniel here and send him a connection request. Don't bother. You're wasting your time. What you want to do instead is reach out to them with a customized message that says why they should meet with you and what makes you different. This is important. So let's talk about this. Let me give it a bad example. Everybody want to hear a bad example? Great timing. I got one this morning. Very entertaining. This is it, and I cut and pasted it into Word again because I didn't want to embarrass the person. So it says, hi, Jameson. I understand that you have a national team that promotes products or services with door hangers. I don't. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'd like to discuss with you how we can best do that. Really? Is there a better way to hang door hangers? With a new technology company disrupting the utility industry with solar. Really? Something like Tesla, perhaps? Hint, this was not from Tesla. And we're opening in Ontario and Alberta on June 14th and 15th, which I really couldn't care less. So this is the bar of intro emails that's happening out there. I literally got this one this morning. As a rule of thumb, I would suggest to everyone, do not do that. Here's a much better way to do it, and here's what I found works. So there's 2 ways to get in contact with this person from this point forwards. One is you can send an email, Inmail. This is LinkedIn service here, which is very interesting. So about 1.5 years ago, LinkedIn hit the tipping point where more than 50% of their users actually access the site via their mobile phone. So what will happen, as I've seen this on my own phone, it almost shows up kind of like a text message. And I thought, wouldn't that be great if I could send a text message to all of my most important prospects? Well, it turned out it used to be quite effective. As of quite recently, myself and my team have found that less effective. The only time you want to use Inmail is if you can't get that person's email address in the normal format. So you can use, there are other data services out there that you can just look up the company. So for example, Daniel here is a real person. He works for Pet Value Canada. And you can look that up on a service. Personally, I've used data.com through the company's Salesforce account quite extensively. I find that to get the email address format to be very effective. And I will email that person directly. That gets a high response now. And that is a change. That was not the case 6-8 months ago. Now you want to email them directly. Everybody with me so far? Next up, let's take a worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, Daniel here, say you cannot get the email address format for Pet Value Canada for whatever reason. It's not in your data.com account. You don't have a data.com account. You don't have any of those services that will find that. You can't find them. Fine. We're going to send them an email, worst case. What do you say? So what is it? Keep in mind, what are the two key pieces of information that we're looking for from someone's profile? When you look at social media, you're not just looking for anything. You're looking for who do you know and how long they've been in their job. Now, here's the interesting part. The interesting part is, what about the rest of the social media tools? What about Twitter? What about Facebook? What about the company's website? What about Google News? Is there value there? And it turns out sometimes not. I actually got a question prior to the webinar from someone who says, what do you think about using Facebook chat for B2B sales? Now, here's my own take on it. My own take on it is, if somebody was trying to get me to purchase something and found me through my Facebook account and sent me a message, that would be uber creepy to me. I wouldn't appreciate that. Most of the people that I've talked to that have significant budget to spend all feel the same. And I'll give you an example of one more old school example that I had when I worked overseas. One of our competitors had found the owners and or CEOs of companies that were looking to buy office buildings, and they had mailed them at home saying, I know I hear you guys were looking for an office building, please take a look at this. They received endless negative backlash on that, and in fact were blacklisted from a lot of the transactions from that point forwards. I would caution most folks from using Facebook, at least as a chat, as an intro. Now that said, if there's somebody out there that's actually using this successfully, I'd love to hear it. I haven't heard it yet. But if there's somebody that's using it successfully, please reach out. I'd love to hear from you and find out how that works. But let's take a look at some of the other things, particularly right here for Daniel. Let's take a look at this. First thing, take a look at Twitter. Is there anything useful in the Pet Value account? I checked for Daniel himself. He didn't have one professionally. There wasn't a lot here. You see lots of fluffy kittens, lots of dogs, which is great. Hey, I'm an animal person. I love looking at this stuff, but that's not useful for me in terms of context. So then I went to the website, and I went into their news section. So this is Pet Value's news section. And the very second thing coming up, Pet Value and Pet Supermarket merge, forming the largest and fastest growing small format specialty pet retailer. Now this is a useful piece of information, and here's why. And it's all contextual. It depends on what you're selling. You will know better than anybody what will apply. And by the way, this search took a couple of seconds. So now I know they're integrating, which means they're probably going to be integrating the accounting systems, which also means they're going to have a heck of a time and manual processes associated with their agreement to cash process. So noted. I'm going to look at that as well. And then I'm going to look at Google News. Now, there can be a fair argument to say, hey, is Google News really social media? Well, considering that you can set it out as a push notification with a Google alert, I would argue that, yeah, it kind of is. It's interactive enough that it would qualify as social media. But moreover, I found Google News to be very effective around telling things the company does not necessarily want you to know. So if there's a scandal, if there's a product recall, if there's something else, or maybe their stock dropped, or there's an issue going on, a lot of those times those issues can form a trigger event for change. And this is really, as salespeople, this is what we do. We sell change. So what's your trigger event? The most powerful question I've found just to really qualify your prospect, to qualify your lead, is this. What will happen if we do nothing? What will happen if we do nothing? And what I'm listening for is this horrible event. You know, he ends up, the poor guy ends up fired, poor, alone, and unhappy. Like, that's the type of outcome that you're listening for. If the answer is, well, nothing really, then you know that that's not necessarily a qualified opportunity because there isn't a triggering event. What Google News and social media can do is it can help you filter what those triggering events might be. And in particular, I have a friend of mine. He sells software and consulting services that makes it harder for companies to cook the books and to have another Enron type scenario. So this is very interesting. So he uses Google News and Google Alerts a lot because he's looking for issues in the news, people having to restate their earnings, all sorts of different issues, because that's his trigger event. I would strongly encourage everybody to use Google News generally and specifically to look for those trigger events, because as a salesperson, that's what you're looking for most of the time. If you can find a company that already has that trigger event in place, it'll dramatically improve your success rate in prospecting, and that's the value of social media today. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's take a look at Pet Value specifically. Anything interesting here? I did a search on him personally. Nothing really came up. Is there anything useful here? Not really. They're opening new stores in Baltimore. Great. Who cares? They're donating to charities. Very good, pardon the pun, fluffy stuff. Not terribly useful. So the power of social media boils down to this. Now we know who the key person is, or likely is, that's responsible for the agreement to cash program at Pet Value. So this is somebody that we probably want to talk to. I know a couple people in common with him. I also know that he's been in the job for about a year, so he's probably a little bit more open to new ideas. And I also know now through social media that they've had a merger recently, and they're going to have very likely all sorts of challenges with that agreement to cash program. Those three pieces of information in total are a gold mine. And do you want to take a look at how we approach it next? Okay, let's take a look next. So what do you say? This is the next thing. And by the way, after we finish this, what do you say, and tuck into it, I'd really like to hear from everybody in the audience. Give me some criteria on Sales Navigator to search for. You see the criteria here. We've got geography, industry, company size, seniority levels, job titles, job functions, and keywords. Give me some criteria to search, and we'll apply this live. Make sense? So let's take a look at Daniel. So now we have these three pieces of information. All of this does not take long to do. Sales Navigator can build those leads for you very quickly. It took less than 3 minutes to enter in all of those things to make sure that I actually had ammunition to approach this person personally. Why? Because so you don't end up with this. Door hangers. You don't want to be the door hanger guy. Don't be the door hanger guy. There you go. There's one message I can leave you with this morning. Don't be the door hanger guy. If you sell door hangers, that's fine. Just make sure you're doing your research on social media ahead of time. So I use a formula that's called Mike's Magic Email that I found works very well. And the first thing you want to lead with in any email is this: people that you know, or a triggering event. So if LinkedIn says it's the most important factor whether somebody responds, fair enough. I'd say let's lead with that. So we both know Sid and Dan, they are great guys, which they really are. I saw you joined Pet Value a while ago, and I'd want your thoughts on automation if you have a sec. Here's the interesting part for me. So when it comes to approaching people, when we've got this information, how to structure it becomes critical. Now, I mentioned that he joined Pet Value a while ago, so he knows that I've done some research on him. This isn't just a mass blast. And I wanted your thoughts on automation. Now, this is important because I found that asking people for their advice or opinion is always more effective than asking somebody for a meeting. You want your advice or your opinion, not a meeting, because everybody loves to give their opinion. Everybody's flattered by the thought that you might have an opinion on something. And I've also noticed, if you have a sec, I noticed that he's a little bit younger, so I put, that's because I saw his graduation from law school date. So if you have a sec, I'm also giving him a way out. And I will continually do this throughout the prospecting process. I will mention things like, if this isn't on the radar right now, not a problem, let me know. Why? Because I want him to tell me no so I can move on to somebody that's a yes. If it's not on the radar, if it's not a top 3 priority, especially as we move into bigger companies. Anybody here sell into really large companies? Ruben, let me know about the chat and see how that goes. So for example, in my day job as a rep, that's what I do. I sell into very, very large companies. And the biggest challenge within that is that it's finding something that's on the priority list. Because if it's not part of their top 3 priorities, it's never going to get done. You're never going to come in and pitch an idea to a company with 40 or 50,000 employees that's going to kick off a brand new direction for the company in any sort of reasonable time frame. That's going to take 12 to 18 months to get that off the ground. It's much better and much easier for me as a rep to piggyback on something that's already moving, especially for larger accounts. So the reason I say that, the reason I'm constantly saying, hey, if this isn't on the radar right now, not a problem, is because I want them to tell me no. And in the process of them telling me no, they usually tell me, actually, we've got to work on something else. Sometimes that something else that actually is a priority is something we can help with, and that's your opportunity. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Tucking into it again. So I advise a company that uses robotic process automation, RPA, on the agreement to cash process. So I know from his LinkedIn profile, he is responsible for the agreement to cash process. Again, it's personalized. This is what social media is all about. To automate the manual part of that process that may be useful after the integration. Again, I have contextual knowledge specifically for him. And then here's the value prop. Why should they talk to us, and what do I want them to do? They bill only on the results, subject to a minimum bill. Would this be worth exploring for 30 minutes next week? Regardless, thanks for the time. Kind regards, Jamie. Those last 2 things are very important. It's just, why should they talk to you specifically? And this is a key part of the value prop that I think most people get wrong. The folks that actually do a half-decent job of coming in to pitch and to come in and talk to my company that I work for, this is usually where they fall down. I'll give you an example. I had a VP at a software vendor, of which, funny enough, we're probably interested in purchasing some of that particular category of software. And they reached out and they said, hey, this is great. This technology as a category is fantastic. Would you like to meet? And they had reached out to the CEO for Canada. They did not get a meeting. Here's why. It's because 30 other people had either pitched us or we had reviewed and talked to that has basically said the same thing. This piece of technology does wonderful things. It was funny enough, it was around robotic process automation. Yes, it does. It does wonderful things. Why should I talk to you versus someone else? This is the key value prop, and it's got to be a sentence or less. Always include that in your initial prospecting email. You'll find that you'll get much better results, particularly the more senior level people you talk to, the better that will work. Make sense? Okay, so they bill only results subject to a minimum bill, which nobody does. That's their value prop. Would this be worth exploring for 30 minutes next week? Sometimes they'll say 15. The reality is that 15 minutes actually doesn't get you very far. 30 can sometimes work, and you usually want to book that in for more like an hour, because if you're lucky and they're actually engaging, whoever you're talking to will have more questions, and that will run over, and it's really hard to get much done in 30 minutes. So this is the framework that I use that seems to work. And to give you a rule, some stats around this, somewhere around 12 to 17% of the emails that myself and my team send out end up resulting in an actual meeting. And it doesn't take that much longer. It's not a mass email blast, but we did a quick check of Twitter, the company website, Google News, and his LinkedIn profile. It took no more than 3 or 4 minutes, and we've got our value prop, and we've got something that's very specific and personalized to them. And really, that's the value of social media. The value of social media means bringing us away from the age of mass market letters hey, you may have already won, you know, the letters from Ed McMahon back in the day, to, hey, I see you might have this problem specifically. Would you like to talk? And that's what makes a difference. Questions, thoughts on that process? Okay.
No questions so far, Jamie.
Okay, cool. Let me know as they come in. In particular, was there any criteria? Is there any other people that we want to search for in terms of the criteria that we want to look at?
We do have some feedback, Jamie, within the Q&A function. If you want to have a look at the criteria that we've received, it might be useful to implement.
Great. Good stuff. All right, well, while we're tucking into that, one question that came up, it was very interesting earlier, the question was, what about WhatsApp? Is this a useful tool to engage with prospects in? And the short version is, yes, it would be if you have enough of a relationship with them to get their cell phone number. When you're prospecting, generally that's so early in the process that you won't have access to their cell phone. You need to give them a reason. You need to give them a very strong reason to hand over the cell phone, which is it's a different process. You're usually too early. Here's what I do use WhatsApp for. I use WhatsApp for a couple of things. Yes, for those clients that are technically literate enough and we've demonstrated enough of a value to give me their cell phone. Yes, I love WhatsApp because I can tell when they're reading my messages. So I know it's gone through. And if they're ignoring me after they've read it, it means there's something wrong and it's probably not worth chasing that particular idea. So that's one thing. The other thing that comes up is that I've used WhatsApp a lot when we're using subject matter experts from different countries to pitch things. And I was thinking about this because I used it the other day. So we were doing a technology demo for a very large organization. And as usual, the experts can be in different countries. We had people from 3 different countries dialing in. And the challenge is I'm sitting there in the room with my clients and I'm watching what they're doing. And the folks on the phone and doing the webinar, they can't see it. They can't see people's reactions. They can't see them tuning out or picking up the phone. So what I do, I have my phone on my lap and I'll have like a one-letter wrote. Well, I have a WhatsApp group with my team on it and the experts, and I'll have one letter to say move on because people are picking up their phones and they don't care. That seems to work well. The challenge then at least for some of my team is still getting them to stop talking. Please move on, stop talking, whether they get the message or not. But that enhances the communication. WhatsApp's very useful for that because text messaging isn't necessarily in real time and you can't tell whether they've read it or not. That's how I'm using WhatsApp. Actually, you know what, Rupalin, when we're just taking a look at the Q&A, why don't you just read out some of the things for us while we're taking a look into this?
Yeah, for sure. We do have some criteria that an audience member wants to try out. Do you want to go with that, or?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So we've got the industry would be heavy equipment sales. The person that they'd like to get in touch with is the marketing function across Canada.
Let's start with the marketing. Yep. Okay.
And then she's looking for advertisers. They've been a heavy equipment publication since 1966. That helps.
Okay. So let's take a look into their categories here. If we're gonna let's take a look at this. Civil engineering, maybe. Government relations, okay. Industrial automation, yeah. Machinery. That's very likely. Let's take machinery, civil engineering. Let's break that out a bit. Anything else is being there. And is this just in Canada or Canada, the United States?
Across Canada.
Across Canada. Okay. And do we have an idea of what seniority level of people we need to talk to?
I would say director and above for.
Yeah. 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 By the way, this is an interesting point when it comes to seniority level and who you want to talk to for these companies. So the traditional advice has always been to go as high as possible and to go top down, and there's some validity to that. Recently, I've also found a shift in going bottom up as well. In particular, if you're pitching to larger organizations, I find a lot of the time the directors are often tasked with the how. How do you do this? And they can be very influential and are usually your best entry point. So for prospecting, don't be afraid to go, I think, go down and maybe going up, depending on what you're selling, to go for the director level. I know a lot of people say, that's it, I only have to pitch the CEO or C-suite, and that's one way of doing things. I found, particularly recently, directors can be very useful. Well, let's deal with digital solutions and innovation. Central line, Autobus, Thomas. Okay, let's talk about Autobus. I'm not familiar with heavy equipment. Let's take a look. I think we're going to have to probably need some a little bit narrower. So buses, okay. Would buses hit that criteria? I'm not sure in terms of heavy equipment. Okay.
No to buses.
No to buses. Global scissors and verticals. What about JLG Industries? Is this the type of criteria you need?
Yes.
Okay. So good. All right. So JLG is the type of person you want. So let's take a look at Paul. These are real folks. Here's how I would pitch them. So one, I see we know a lot of people in common. So I'd choose a person I have the best relationship. Wow, we know a lot of people in common. I choose a couple of the people I knew in a professional context that would 100% act as a recommendation. Ideally, somebody at the same level as a peer. With this many people, a lot of the time I will point out, say we have a ton of people in common on LinkedIn. I'm surprised we haven't come across each other. Looking at him, I don't think I've met him personally. So he's been there 3 years, 6 months. So those are the two key pieces of information. What else do we need? All right, so I went to Brock. Okay, so those are two key pieces of information. Now let's take Paul. Let's take a look at Google News. Do this live, because you can see how long it takes. It's easy to look. I see these software demonstrations, and they do it so fast, and everything looks great. EMEA, okay. JLG Industries has a brand new marketing director at JLG. Now, for the EMEA, and you say you cover Canada. Interesting. That may be an interesting piece of information. Run over by tractor trailer, okay. Good. All right. I'm going to go with JLG Industries. And I'm going to bring up Twitter too. JLG US and Canada. I want to find out what they're saying about themselves. Canada. Yes, there. My choice. Sure. No feedback about. All about JLG. News. That's the one we're looking for. So, anything else? Not necessarily. Okay. And what about JLG Industries? Okay. New people. All right, so it looks like if I was pitching Paul, that's what I've got. There's a new EMEA marketing director. He's been there 3 years and 6 months, so he's okay. We know a lot of people in common. That's what I would lead with. So I would reach out and start with, I noticed that we had a ton of people in common. And I wanted your thoughts on whatever you're selling, on your marketing strategy, if you have a sec. Now, this is interesting. Marketing directors, in particular, they're some of the most sold to people in any organization. Marketing will typically have the highest budget of any division in a company. It's usually marketing, then IT. They have the biggest budgets. So these guys get hit on a lot. What you'll notice here is I'm guessing Paul may not be super active on social media. Here's why. Because the marketing directors who are end up shutting down the Inmail function because too many people are reaching out to them. So that could be good. I'd mention the people that you know in common and a couple sentences about your unique value prop, asking if we could connect and share what's working. That's another key prospecting strategy that social media can influence. I found that whole phrase of, hey, let me share what's working to be extremely effective. But again, it has to be in context. So they have a new EMEA marketing director, maybe they have a new product rollout that they need to market to, and that's upcoming. Saying, if we can help you roll out that, we've got a couple of ideas that we've seen work with other heavy equipment manufacturers. Can we chat? That will sometimes work very well, sharing what's working, but again, only in context, and asking for somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes. If it's 15 minutes, you better have a heck of a value prop in a couple of sentences, and hope they go. Any other criteria or questions that came in, Rublin?
Yep, we've got, I think, one other. We have someone who's searching for fleet managers or operations managers for highway trucking fleets. A little bit more technical.
Interesting. Fleet managers for trucking, just for Canada?
Let's go with Canada.
Okay. VP and director.
Yep.
And it's going to be an industry. We're going to say, what about transportation? Transportation, trucking, railroad, those guys? And no specific company function. You want to be an ops. Operations. Okay, so you have 2,190 results. Way too many. Let's talk about fleet manager. Add some keywords in there. 0. Oh, wait a sec. 252 results. That's better. You would actually want to narrow this down even further. Maybe let's take out directors. That's still too many. 65. Okay, that's a lot more manageable. There we go. Scott McDonald, CP Rail. Let's take a look at him. Let's repeat that process. So Scott, we know a ton of people in common, which is good. 4 years, 9 months. Okay, so he's relatively new, but he had this other job that he got promoted from. So he's been there for a long time. Okay, so he's kind of a lifer. Interesting, he came from the military. He posted anything recently? Let's see. No, he hasn't. And then we go through the exact same process. Again, mentioning who you know in common, what your value prop is, and anything that's of note. So I know there's been a lot of management changes with these folks. As a fleet manager, trucking, it's probably rail, it's probably not who they need. General manager, Trimac Transportation. Here we go. That might be a little bit more. There we go. So interesting. So he used to be the general manager. Now he's the VP Sales of Energy Services. So we'll probably not want him anymore. Let's take a look at him. Pricing reporting, managing director logistics. That sounds a little bit more what you're looking for. 4 years, 6 months. Okay, we moved over. We know a couple people.
So Jamie, just a quick one here. If you do have anyone in common with your existing lead on LinkedIn, Sales Navigator, what would the introduction to the lead be, typically?
First thing is I'd say, hey, I see we both know Jerry and Darren on LinkedIn. Yeah, I would just mention that in the LinkedIn. LinkedIn actually has a function for social media that says ask for an introduction. I have sent out dozens of these, at least 3 dozen I have never got a response from anybody on it. So I'm not sure whether that's a technology issue with LinkedIn itself, or the fact that people just don't want to provide intros, or maybe all of those people just hate me. I don't know. Could be any of the above. But I found it to be totally useless. So the only way that we've found to get around that is say, hey, I know both of these people in common. Absolutely. Absolutely. It depends on the industry, too. For things like banking, legal, insurance, being part of the club is very important. You want to demonstrate that.
Sounds good.
So here's some examples of how to use this. Other social media. So Twitter for B2B, I have found to be less effective unless someone's in marketing. If you're looking to pitch someone in marketing, they tend to be a little bit more active on Twitter, and you can comment on things that they've posted. That's also where this feature on Sales Navigator comes in handy. 10 people posted on LinkedIn in the past 30 days. Versa-Cold Logistics Services, okay. General Manager, let's see with Sandra. What did he post? How does BRC compliance affect the Versa-Cold customer? Okay, so I'd have a quick read of that and see whether that's potentially related to anything that I would be selling, or I'd just comment on it and say, hey, I saw your post on BRC compliance. Very interesting. Or maybe it wasn't, or insightful if it wasn't interesting. They rarely are. It's like, that's good to know. And I would comment on that. That can be effective as well. The idea behind that is this. Here's the rule of thumb that you want to have in your mind, is that you're trying to demonstrate that it's personalization. That's what social media is all about, that it's not a mass email blast. So whether you're getting that from people that you know in common, which is very effective, or a post that they've written, or their Twitter page, that can be extremely effective. You're personalizing it. Make sense? Any other questions about other social media tools that we haven't covered here? Is there anything that's coming up that people are thinking, hey, I want to try this, or what's your experience with it?
Just a couple of other questions on LinkedIn. What is your experience joining groups or private or public groups on LinkedIn to increase your the visibility in your network? Does that normally work out for salespeople, Jamie?
Good question. I haven't found it to. Posting on general groups, and here's why. Is because the groups that I've joined, like CIO groups, for example, they have a lot of people posting which are very thinly disguised pitches saying, please buy my stuff, is what they're really saying. They're not really adding value, they're not adding insight. And if you have that really, really unique and specialized skill set where you can teach somebody something about their business that they didn't already know, yeah, go ahead and write an article. Sure. I post on my own LinkedIn specific articles that I know my top prospects would be interested in, and occasionally I just forward them a hyperlink to something I've written. That can be time consuming. A better use of the LinkedIn groups. There's two ways to use those very effectively in my experience. Number one, you can get around the InMail restriction. If you have, you only get, I don't know, 5 or 6 InMails a month that you're allowed to send out, and they'll credit you one back if the person responds. So if you've sent out 5 and 2 people respond, they'll allow you to send another 2 that month. If you're a member of the same group, you can message them through that group for free, and they won't charge you. So that's one use of joining a group. The other use of joining a group I found are actually building a group. So I have one for my prospects that I ask everybody to join after a meeting, and what I'm continually posting stuff because I want to be top of mind. And when you're looking to connect with someone who really has no reason to connect with you, or maybe wouldn't be able to see the value prop, or you're not be able to put your value prop in that short window for that note for connection, you can invite them to a group that you built. And that can be very effective. Saying, I want to connect with the CIO of some gigantic company. Yeah, he gets a lot of requests. There's a lot of people trying to get on this guy's radar. If you can say, I'm sharing some of the best ideas I've seen with my narrow niche around fleet transportation, or marketing and advertising around how to get new clients for fleet transportation. whatever specific insight you have and build a group around that, and your connection request is saying, I would love to invite you to this group to share what we've seen working. That's great. That works extremely well. The caveat to that is you really have to be able to not just be sharing information, but be sharing insight. And there's a critical difference between the two.
Thanks for that, Jamie. Do you think that normally it matters if you are viewing them anonymously, or that they can see who you are when looking for prospects on LinkedIn?
Also a good question. I leave my viewing public. I want them to see that I'm looking at their profile. So because it shows, one, interest, and two, research, that we're not just flogging stuff. So I leave that public. With the exception, you want to make sure that you're not on that person's LinkedIn every day. That would be super creepy. We've all, matter of fact, every one of my team, each one of us has had some random person on our LinkedIn reading our LinkedIn profile every day for a couple of months, and we have no idea why. Super creepy. Don't do that. Leave it public, but check out their profile once or twice when you're talking to them.
That's a good tip. That's a good faux pas. And for Sales Navigator, do you know if this can be purchased for the team or if it's one single user only?
No, you can do both.
Okay.
The LinkedIn, funny enough, LinkedIn Toronto, they have a big team right here. They're based at 250 Yonge, actually. Really good guys. So they can give you extra features and functionality. If I remember correct, and again, I'm not a salesperson on LinkedIn, I'm not sure. If I remember correctly, is that if you start getting above 20 users or so as a team, then you can get extra features and functionality if you purchase it. Otherwise, get everybody to purchase it individually. They also have a new feature called Team Link, which allows you to see the connections of not only yourself, but everybody on your team as well. Say, hey, you're connected to somebody else on my team, which of course has that's the best one. If you can connect with somebody you work with and say, hey, I see somebody else, that they already work for you, has a vested interest in helping you succeed, so much the better. I can't say I've had a lot of success with Team Link yet, because the industry that I'm selling into is quite small. The universe of people I need to sell to, generally all know each other anyway. Okay. But if they don't, use Team Link.
Okay, now we've got 5 more minutes for any other questions. So anyone within the audience now, please feel free to send any questions you need through the Q&A function on GoToWebinar.
Yeah. And while we're doing that, let me do a quick wrap up to encapsulate all of this. People say, how do you use social media for prospecting? The short version is you're using it for 2 things: to find out who you need to talk to, and some research, some ammunition about what to say. You can use LinkedIn Sales Navigator, Google News, the company's website, occasionally Twitter. And with those tools together, you're looking for who do you know in common? How long have they been in their job? Are they posting anything on LinkedIn? Because you're looking at what's going on with their company. If they have a significant trigger event, again, it depends what you're selling. A lot of the stuff that I sell doesn't necessarily have a trigger event. My friend who sells risk consulting and software to help stop people cooking the books, that's definitely an event-based sale. It works really well for him. Depends on what you're selling, but you're looking for trigger events or ideas to personalize it. And when you put it together, reach out to them, not through Inmail. Go to their direct email address. Use data.com, use one of the other services that will find you the email address format of the company you're in, and give them a Mike's Magic email saying, hi, I noticed something that personalized. I noticed we have people in common, event at your company. Here's what we do. Here's specifically why you should talk to us rather than the other 25 people that have pitched them today, and here's what I want. Can we connect for 15 minutes and share what's working? We found that to be very effective. Usually we'll see somewhere between 12 and 17% of those emails will end up in a meeting. Does that make sense?
That's perfect, Jamie. Thank you so much. So we do have a couple of other questions in the pipe that unfortunately we don't have time for, but please feel free to email your additional questions over to salessuccess@cpsa.com and we can try to get them answered as soon as possible. Of course, on behalf of the CPSA and AVIS, thank you so much, everybody, for joining today, for joining today's webinar. And Jamie, thanks so much again for hosting such a wonderful webinar. Everybody, please be informed that we will be sending out a webinar recording probably by this afternoon. So please stay tuned for that. Everybody have a great day and thank you so much for joining.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great week.